Hello, hello. Here we are again, coming to you from the broadcast Team Alpha and the Paranormal World Show. And we are on 44 different platforms out there, so you can find us just about everywhere. And my name is Hage, and I'm the host. And if you are watching us on YouTube right now, that's the place to be, because that's the only place we can watch and monitor the chat room. So you can ask questions, you can comment in there, participate in the show with all kinds of good comments, hopefully. And yes, and then if you want to get a hold of me, all you have to do is to go to our website, broadcastteamalpha.com, find the contact feature and send me an email, and I'll get the email, I'll get back to you and see what I can do for you. So this is going to be a deep conversation here today, because I have an incredible lady with me. Her name is Crystal Cassidy, and you can find her on www.soulpodapp.com, soulpodapp.com. And she's also on Instagram and a bunch of other places, on YouTube and so on. So you can find her there also. Now, I want to say just a few words about Crystal. A lot of you already know her because she's just about everywhere. And Crystal is the founder of SoulPod. SoulPod, we're going to hear more about that. She is a biochemist turned mystic. I love mysterious stuff. And the SoulPod bridges neuroscience, physical, mental, and spiritual sciences, and conscious energy, so we can understand it and be able to work with it, so we can create good things in our life. And everything in our reality is based on science. Now, it may be spiritual science, which mankind as a whole had no clue about, but there is a science to it, and we're going to talk about that. Crystal is pioneering the future of spiritual technology, understanding, and how to use it. So, without any more from me, welcome to the show, Crystal.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. You know, you are probably the second most busiest person in the world, and they're still arguing about who is number one.
Exciting times.
Yeah, I wonder, you know, you were in the business world, you were doing what everybody else does, but why in the world did you end up going off on this spiritual, scientific path as you're doing? How did that start for you?
Great question. I had been a meditator since I was pretty young. So I started when I was 12 because I did martial arts or warrior yoga, and meditation was a big part of that practice. I was reluctant at first because I didn't want to meditate as a kid, but I later learned what a gift it was. So there was that already going on. And I worked in biotech, I worked in pharmaceutical research, cancer research, genomic diagnostics. And at one point, it just started to hit me that I was done with biotech, which is a really weird thing to experience, especially after some pretty great success. And it's one of those whispers that started to nip at my heels. And so I was kind of one foot in the biotech world, one foot starting to step outside of it, and trying to figure out what was next and what my passion was and my curiosity, which as I started to awaken, have Kundalini awakening, mystical experiences, interdimensional experiences, that's where my interest was. That's where my passion was budding. And so, especially after my near-death experience, I had all this space in the year that I was recovering to think about what I wanted to do. And it kind of wiped the slate clean. So I had a blank space, I had a blank table, and I really had to think more consciously about what I wanted to put on that table. And that's when I started to think about how could I help people as far as their awakening journey and where the world's going, and try and provide some more structure, some more information and guidance that would help people step into their fullest self.
Yeah, yeah. I that Kundalini experience was probably a turning point for you. I think most people, if they have something like that, there's gonna be another path.
There's going to be absolutely everything shifts after that because your frequency is shifted. Your baseline operating system has been turned on in a new
Yeah,
way. And
yeah.
so you just everything changes after that.
I think too that now when you are counseling people now, do you talk about this and maybe helping people to guide them in that kind of direction also?
Yeah, I think, what we've called Kundalini awakening, I like to call it essential channel activation, especially if people get a little hung up on the word Kundalini.
Yeah,
Kundalini means this coiled, potent, unrealized energy at the base of the central channel. And we all have it, it's all there. And we have a protective mechanism over that channel, which is needed because if you're not ready, especially your nervous system is not ready for that increase in energy, it can be a pretty intense experience.
yeah.
And so we can learn how to start to move that cap, more energy to flow into the central channel, and you start to get much more familiar with your energy centers, which are very real, and your perspective starts to change as that energy starts to move. So I think of that system as inner technology, and we can learn to consciously work with it.
What does it feel like when you have an experience like that?
Yeah, I was in a rather normal everyday meditation, had done some breath work, and I started to feel this sensation of very hard to explain, but it almost feels like this ignition in the pelvis. It feels like a river starting to flow upwards. It feels like spiritual heat is another way to think of it. It's a very unique sensation. And I think a lot of people get tripped up with the Kundalini starting to move or that central channel starting to come online with sexual energy. But I discovered, and this was after calling up an ashram because I was so curious as to what was happening to me. And I got to talk to a nun, and she told me, this is why we do what we do. Now you understand. And explained to me that it's not sexual energy, it's just energy. In the first few centers, what happens is that energy starts to bleed out into the tissues around it, activating that area of the body. And she was totally right because once it hit my navel, my power center, I got nauseous.
Mm.
So there's a physical overlay with the energy moving, and that's what a lot of people first notice. But there's also a consciousness experience, the oneness experience, where even though I previously believed we were all connected, you have a shift from belief into knowing, and you actually experience the depth of that connection of oneness when this central channel comes on, and more of yourself can entangle in the truth, in the field-based experience, whatever you want to call it, but you perceive it for yourself. And that's where the big shift comes from. You can't go back after that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that when people go off on this path for higher consciousness, it may be a natural progression into that state if you're open to it. Could
Absolutely.
could that be it?
Yeah, I think, I didn't know at the time what a Kundalini awakening was. I just experienced it because I was open to it. I was curious.
Hmm.
I wasn't just meditating for stress reduction or better sleep, even though that is great. I was curious about the intersection with consciousness, and I'd had a few peaks before that, but nothing quite like what I experienced in that awakening. So I think it meets you when you're ready. I do think
Yeah.
there's a degree of timing and trust. And I also tell people that if yours mind moved slowly over time, it met each energy center starting to move more and more over the years. So I didn't have a straight up into the seventh center experience, which I'm kind of grateful for. I had a,
Yeah.
I really learned how it moves and to understand each experience and increasingly understanding that experience. But I also learned that once it starts moving, my whole life was about to change in probably the next 2 weeks. So I would write in my journal,
Yeah.
just watch out for the next 2 weeks because everything's probably going to change.
Ooh, yeah. And then from there, I guess a few years later, you ended up with a near-death experience.
Mhm.
That must have been an incredible experience.
Yeah, it was incredible in all aspects of the word, incredibly challenging, incredibly insightful. Um, for me, it was in 2020, so there was the pandemic, and that's, I had a viral experience. But before that even happened in January, I was in a meditation teacher intensive training and had been meditating for long hours for most of January. And it's interesting looking back on it because I was having premonitions of what was to come. I was starting to see it and feel it in my experience before it actually was in my experience, which is very, very odd. And I was also perceiving a past life. And this is kind of hard to explain to people, but I was perceiving, which is also a simultaneous life because it's all happening now. But I was seeing this lifetime in my meditations of a man who lived on Earth back in time a bit. And there was a war and a pandemic going on. He'd gone to war, he got injured, and he came back, and found his family had all died from the disease. For some reason, and the reason I mention this is because as I went into my near death experience, I was seeing him. And for some reason, I still probably don't fully understand what was going on in that lifetime and what I was going through was intertwined.
Mm.
And we were both shifting these timelines at the same time. And I'll share a little bit later about what I saw when I saw him last and what had changed. But I got sick. It was, lockdown very early on. Nobody knew what was going on. I was talking to all my medical friends. I know some phenomenal doctors, and we were trying to figure out what to do. And I got sicker and I got sicker and I got sicker. I ended up in the hospital, had to go into quarantine, had to say goodbye to my husband, didn't know whether I was going to see him again because he couldn't come with me. That was one of the hardest parts of the journey was saying goodbye to him.
Wow.
Yeah, it still gets me. But there was a high degree of loneliness, of feeling like I had been cast out into the void. And even by the medical institution, it wasn't their fault, but they didn't know what to do. So they were asking me, your nervous system's failing, your cardiovascular system's failing. We can try giving you this drug, but we don't know whether it will help or hurt. And so I couldn't walk anymore. And it took me quite a while to learn to walk again after this. But where it started to get very transcendental was a few things. One, I felt death as an energy near me. And the best way I can explain that is it's almost as if an old friend shows up at your door unexpectedly. And you're like, oh, I've met you before. I recognize you. I didn't expect you to be here right now. So there was this weird familiarity with death. And not in a scary way, just in a like, oh, I know what my circumstances are. I also could see increasingly with clarity that there were two paths. One is a path where I did pass, and one was a path where I stayed.
Mm.
And I was getting more clear on why it was that I would stay. But at this point, I was kind of in and out of my body. My body was a really hard place to be. It was very painful. I was having cytokine storms in my lungs, which I knew enough about to know that I was in trouble because what that feels like is like heat and
Yeah.
then coldness and then stiffness
Mm.
over and over. So it feels like bricks are being laid in your lungs and it's very painful. And I
Mm.
had a moment where I was in between, I would call it, I didn't see the light. I was in a void. And in this void, there was a being that met me. But this only happened, it all happened at once. So there was a moment where I surrendered. And this is surrendering in a way that was not giving up. It was letting go enough so that all the resistance that I was experiencing in my mind, in my body, I just gave it over. And in this surrender, I was able to kind of like fall back into life, is the best way that I can explain it. And because that resistance was gone, I could simultaneously feel my highest self ask for help. And
Mm.
when that call for help went out, this being showed up
Oh,
in
okay.
this space. It was immediate. It all happened at like once. And I didn't see this being physically. I simply felt a loving presence in the experience of being deeply witnessed for all it is that I am, not just my human incarnation.
Mm.
And I could sense my body, but I could also feel my energy body. And this being started to work with my energy body. And at first, it was my root center, that first center. I could feel that. And then it was the space in between my eyebrows, the sixth center, and then my heart space. So it kind of went like bing, bing, bing. And then I was back in my body and knew that I was going to be okay. And I knew that I was going to stay, not because I wasn't afraid of death, but because I was afraid of not living my purpose in this lifetime,
Yeah.
which is a very different reason for staying. And as I started to recover, which took a while, I had another experience where time gets very trippy. And I had finally walked down into a little fire escape area and had finally been able to look at the sky, which I hadn't seen in a long time. And I looked up at the sky and had this profound moment of oneness and of feeling very safe and like I was going to make it, like I was going to make it through this. And I thought about that for years afterwards because it was such a prominent experience, but very simple. And I was in a meditation about a year ago, about 3 hours into it. So rather long meditation.
Yeah.
But my heart opened up and this wave picked me up and it placed me on that fire escape 5, 6 years ago. And I was looking at my past self, sitting down, looking up at the sky. And I realized that what I was experiencing, what I was sensing in that moment was my future self. And I could perceive the change in frequency from where I had been and where I was at that point. And there was some sort of exchange that happened, maybe healing, but that really changed my perception around what it means to heal and of course what it means to be outside of time. And that sometimes it can be you just from the future.
Mm.
And, I walked around my old apartment for a bit and then came back. But yeah, it was a pretty profound experience all in all.
When you knew you were coming back and when you knew you were staying, you mentioned that something about your purpose. Did you know your
Mm.
purpose at that time, or did that purpose come from your experience?
I think it came from the experience. I had little inklings of it. I could feel it, is a better way to put it. I could feel the momentum of my purpose calling to me.
Yeah,
I think that the change that I was needing to make was actually listening to that calling and following that momentum and being okay with there being some unknown in that process. That's part of what it means to be in the human experience is we don't know it all at once, right? And so
yeah,
trusting my purpose in a whole different way is what I had to do.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think too that at least most people that are at least half awake, they can feel that there is a change. Most of us interpret that as an acceleration of consciousness.
Mhm.
And when we are accelerating our consciousness, our whole being is changing frequency. And we are going to a higher level of consciousness that may possibly separate us from the pure 3D existence. But how do you envision something like that happen? The next evolution we need in order to reclaim our higher consciousness power.
Mm.
This is a lot of people, or most people, I think just about everybody is wondering, how is this going to unfold? A lot of
Mm.
them are afraid that, oh, maybe I have to die first. I don't think so. But what are you thinking about this concept? Where are we going?
It's such a great, beautifully put question. I think I think where we're going is very exciting. I'm very optimistic. And I know that it seems like, how could you be optimistic? There's a lot of chaos. And, other people have said this, and I agree. It's because, and I experienced this at the micro level in my own awakening journey, is that right before there's a breakthrough, there's resistance.
Yeah.
Your body's fighting you, your mind's fighting you in ways that are, most of us are even unaware of how mischievous this resistance can be. But if you stay with it, if you sit with it and say, I'm not going anywhere, I'm here, that breakthrough is often a lot closer than you think it is. And 10 out of 10 times, there is something on the other side. And so if you take that experience and look at it at a collective experience, I think the breakthrough is closer than we think. We're in a lot of resistance. And ultimately, it's not going to be anybody outside of us. It's each one of us taking the responsibility on for our consciousness, for our own evolution. And as we do that as individuals, the power of somebody stepping into higher awareness is exponential. It's not linear.
Mm.
And so as people do that, and I got a big chill with with that one. As people do that, it's going to shift things pretty dramatically. And so I would say it requires courage, it requires patience, trust, some faith, and devotion to your own wholeness. And to make sure, the most practical thing is to make sure that you're doing something for your highest evolution every day. For me, that's meditating.
Mhm.
And that really will change things because we're awakening to our interdimensionality. That's what my guides have told me. That many species end up in places that we are, but what's really interesting is we're ending up in these really in big times, big changes, and when we are also realizing our interdimensionality, becoming these beings that can turn the system on and work with reality and creation in a whole new way. And so I think that's where we're going.
Yeah. I think when I get the question ever so often, and that is that what will life be like when we are in the fifth dimensional existence? will we have all the answers, or can we create
Mm,
out of seemingly nothing? Or, well, I think one of the things that's going to happen is that I want your opinion on this because I think it's going to be very important for most of us, and that is when we know we are in the fifth dimensional existence, that is when we think about something we want, and within a very short time, it shows up.
hmm Yeah, I agree. I think right now we can be grateful for the element of time in this experience because
Yeah.
if we had instant manifestation, all of our thoughts, all of that is instantly creating. Now, that could accelerate us in many ways, right? If we
Yeah.
learn and take responsibility for the fact that I had this negative thought about myself and then that materialized something, it brings it more to the forefront of how important your creative powers are. It's not just in what we say, it's in what we think, it's in our thoughts, it's in
Yeah.
how we feel. And right now we can hide a lot of that. We can show up in a certain way, but internally we're experiencing something different. So there's this disconnect. But I think you're right, as you get into these higher dimensional experiences, everything changes. The relationship to time changes and to various degrees. And I think there's a massive gradient that even we're not quite aware of yet, that are varying degrees of separation from source and oneness. And I think there's beings that are very close to that source oneness experience, but they're just maybe a few degrees separated. And those are a lot of the collective consciousness species or collectives that are high dimensional collectives
Mhm.
or collective of collectives. But then there's various degrees of interdimensionality that I think we can inhabit along that way. And when you can start to really be architects, true architects of creation. And I also think the relationship to emotion changes. And it's a really cool superpower that we have in this dimension, which is very visceral because we have physical bodies. But as you release the physical experience, as you release communication needing to be through speech and it becomes telepathic, everything shifts. So your experience of emotions shifts. You still have experiences, but it's more of a acknowledgement of the frequency that you're experiencing than what we would call an emotional experience. So I think that changes as well. And we can move through this reality and probably into other realities at will. And that's a whole nother experience that I think as a species, we're just waking up to that possibility.
That's another show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, though, that there's no question we are raising our consciousness, but I think we have to plan ahead a little bit because
Mm.
when we start creating at the power of thought, boy, oh boy, that can be scary.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man, some of the things we guys are thinking, we just don't even want to visit that again. But I tell you, when you start seeing the results of it, it really gets exciting
Oh, yeah.
because I
Absolutely.
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it already. There are things that I think because Nori Love and I, we do a mastermind group where we actually are
Mm.
creating out of seemingly nothing sometimes.
Yeah.
Like
It's
especially when it comes to health and healing. One lady was in the hospital on her deathbed, and we wrapped our mastermind around her and visualized her walking out of the hospital perfectly healthy. The next day in the afternoon, her husband called me and he said, "My wife is home."
mm, love
And
it.
the doctors told her, "You recovered so fast, there was no reason for us to keep you anymore."
Yep. This is totally possible. And I know that it can be hard for people to wrap their heads around, but I'll share a story that may be helpful. So I was diagnosed with a heart condition. So I
Oh,
have an interval mismatch. And so it's not fatal, but it puts extra stress on my heart. I'm more prone to palpitations and arrhythmias and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I was told that I would have this for the rest of my life. And, I get it checked every now and then, make sure that it hasn't gotten worse. And so I was at the doctor maybe 6 months ago, and they were doing an EKG, checking out my heart. And they came back into the room, and the doctor seemed confused. And he was like, "We didn't pick up an abnormal heart rhythm." And I was like, "Oh, interesting." And he said, "We're going to get another machine and do another pass, to make sure." Because it shouldn't have been able to happen. And they did another machine, we did another test, and I just don't have an abnormal heart rhythm anymore. So that really blew my mind. I had never really thought about that resolving, but I have done a lot of work around seeing myself with strength, vitality, increasing good health as I get older and older, and a deeper relationship with my body, trusting it to hold me and to guide me and to be my partner on this awakening journey. And so I have engineered a whole new relationship with my body. And so to your prior comment, yes, we do have a delay slightly in this reality. And also, because everything's possible, it can also happen all at once.
Yeah,
So it really depends on how you orient to it. And we are creating, we're always creating. Most of us are creating subconsciously and unconsciously, and then disappointed by how things evolve in our lives. So, but as you take responsibility for that, which is daunting. I get it. But as you do, it starts to be a lot of fun, and you can play
yeah,
with it and you can experiment with it. That's why I like the term spiritual scientist. I'm like, experiment with it, see what happens.
yeah. Well, you healed it. You
Yeah.
healed that part of it because thoughts are things, right?
Yeah.
You heard that one. And when you're thinking it, the subconscious mind is listening. The neural network goes to work trying to create chemicals that will reach into the blood and go through the heart and affect it in a healing way. So the whole the human body is a self-correcting machine if we
Yeah.
know how to operate it.
I love that. I think that's
Yeah,
a really powerful definition. And that's why these healing groups and what you're doing and with that woman being able to go home is so powerful. And that's what we can do in community when we
yeah,
come together with awakening people.
yeah.
That's such a gift to be able to do for our fellow mankind.
Absolutely. And I see now we're down to the bottom of the hour. And for those of you that joined us late, we are talking with Crystal Cassidy. Oh, this is getting deep, but we're going to save the really good part for the very last time. So hang with us. I don't know what it is yet, but it will be there. And yeah, we're talking about near-death experiences and the power of the mind. And she is helping people in her counseling, in her talk with clients about how to develop that so they can create wonderful things in their life. And that's why you need to go visit her website. That's soulpodapp.com. Soulpodapp.com. And she's on Instagram and YouTube and a lot of other places. So you can find her just about everywhere. So, yes. Now, I you mentioned also before we started recording that you had an ET contact.
Mm.
I just love that subject too. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics because it's accelerating so much as we speak. And so I think I've decided, instead of kind of like holding some of these experiences tighter to my personal life as I experience it, I'm trying to share it as I experience it because I think it can be helpful for us. But I've had contact experiences since about 2011, 2012. I think a lot of things shifted around 2011, 2012. And at first in the dream state, which looking back, I really appreciate because it's a lot for the analytical mind to handle when you're presented with something like this.
Yeah.
And so the dream state is a really powerful place to meet them. And I was always curious, I grew up watching Star Trek. I love sci-fi. I'm writing a science fiction novel. And so I'd always been a little bit open, if you will, but hadn't had any direct experiences until the dream state. I woke up knowing that it was not a dream. It was vivid. It felt like a communication. I some things were said to me that were very personal about what was going to happen in my lifetime. And they said that they would be providing instructions or guidance as the years go by, which to a T has happened and is just fascinating to me. But they were approaching me in forms that I would recognize at first, which I'm very interested about this Steven Spielberg movie coming out. And I was noticing these kind of like animals and whatnot. And they're really not animals, but they're trying to approach you in ways that are not going to stress you out. But as the years have gone on, I have experienced so many contact experiences that they're hard to get into. But some of the more notable ones are I would go out and meditate with the intention to connect. And I would feel them in multiple dimensions of experience. So my central channel would activate. I know they're nearby when my central channel starts to move. And then the more concrete experiences of ships going straight over my house. We had when I was with my parents, so they also saw it. 3 ships appeared or materialized over our beach house in North Carolina. And there was a flash of light. So the flash of light, I just saw an orb to my left. So it was interesting. And
Yeah.
there's a flash, they're here.
You got them too, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. That was cool.
Yeah.
Um, so there was a flash of light, and we all looked in that direction. And there was 3 big ships, about maybe 100 feet max over us, so very low. So we got a real detailed look. And they're classic flying saucer shape. They were partially transparent in the middle of each craft, but more fully solid towards the outside. There was this kind of like orange pink light around the rims of all 3 of these craft, and they're completely silent. They were interacting with each other almost like they were entangled with themselves, but flew really smoothly. And we all kind of just froze, and even for me, having had internal experiences, meditative experiences, seeing them far up in the sky, this was a lot to process. Just like out of a science fiction movie. Once you see that again, you can't
Yeah.
unsee it, right?
Right.
So it was pretty incredible.
Wow. Did you have close proximity contact with them?
That was the closest up until about 2 weeks ago, to be honest with you.
Wow.
And I've had, well, I could say the other close proximity experience was in Joshua Tree about 2 years ago, and was out in the desert with a couple other teachers after one of our retreats, and they came down to the surface. And there's a whole series of events that happens when they come down, and there's all kinds of different beings. So I also channel, that's only come online the last year, but I channel an interdimensional collective. But then there's these other beings, and these ones in Joshua Tree were what I could feel to be masters of physical energetics. So they were like master healers. And so as they came down, it felt like a fishbowl went over the group. All of a sudden the sound sounds different. The humidity changes. You're in the desert. There isn't supposed to be any humidity. And then I was being lifted up out of my hammock, and my body moved in different ways and running an incredible amount of energy through my body to the point to where I was spasming, not painfully, but it was just intense. And they told me, I was telling them out loud, and my friends all got really quiet because they were pretty overwhelmed themselves. I was telling them, I think that's good. That's enough. It was very intense. And they told me, if we stop now, it's kind of like stopping in the middle of surgery and you can handle this. So they're very cognizant of free will, but they also know naturally, probably better than you do, where your boundaries are, or what you can handle. They're very deeply aware. But after that experience, when I was sitting up and some of my friends had to help me because it was so intense on my body, I had light coming through my skin for just like 30 seconds. I was a bit blue because there was so much light coming through.
Wow.
And that changed my meditation practice, my ability to connect with whatever that frequency is that they're on is a lot easier now. Um, And then about 2 weeks ago, they came down to the ground in Tahoe with, interestingly, my same friend that was with me in Joshua Tree. We were in Tahoe together, and there were 3 or 4 ships in the sky. This distortion field came through, so you can't really focus on anything. And then they were down on the ground about 100 feet away, and that was pretty wild. It's really incredible, but
Yeah.
they're very they've told me it's time. And there are some of us on the planet that are in the process of better understanding who it is they are. There's a process to this so that we can help humanity at large understand who these beings are and
Yeah.
have our own personal experiences so that um, not everybody freaks out.
I am thinking that were they interdimensional beings, or do you think they were full-time physical?
I think they all have interdimensional capacities to various degrees. And so my experience has been because they interact in multiple different dimensions of experience
Hmm.
that they're interdimensional beings. Some, I think, have greater access to physical manifestation than others.
Hmm. Do you think it was an entirely a mental experience, or should I say, yeah, a consciousness event, or maybe
Mm.
was it actually physical what you saw?
So I think the way that they travel, communicate, and interact is all through consciousness. So I view contact as a consciousness phenomenon.
Mhm.
That being said, there's a physical component as well. And so when we saw the ships, that was very physical. Multiple people saw and perceived and could perceive the ships. The experience in the desert was a little different. We saw red lights from the ground into the sky. And then I didn't ever see it, which was interesting because I had the more intense experience. They saw a mist come down over the whole group. And then that experience happened with me energetically and physically being lifted. So I was not responding to gravity in the normal way. And other people perceived that. So it's both and as far as the consciousness component of it. It is an interdimensional, multi-dimensional experience. So you
Mhm.
can feel them in your head, you can feel them in your body, you can see them physically. Um, Not always, but they are willing to be physical for us because they know that's what we need. They know that we need to be able to perceive something to make this more real for ourselves.
Mhm.
I haven't had, well, ooh, I almost didn't. Yeah, this one is a more direct physical experience is when one of the beings of the collective, so some manifestation of the collective that I channel materialized in my living room right to the right here. And so when that being became physical partly in my living room, that was such an intense energy, completely unexpected. I was in between meetings. And it was a long oval shaped with blue and like a purple outline. And it threw me into a meditative state on the couch behind me. It was so much energy. And this was after I'd had some meditations where they had been showing me how to open a channel. And this was them saying, okay, did you get it yet? Like we were really serious here. And I was talking with them, of course, in my mind, and they were showing me again how to work the channel, answering some of my questions, acknowledging that this is free will. The only reason it can happen is because of the work of consciousness that you've done. And they're here to support us during this transition, like
Yeah,
other beings had supported them when they needed it. And that's why they're here. But that being in the physical partly with me was so intense. I almost couldn't stay in my body or stay attached to my identity, if that makes sense, because
hmm.
it was so much energy that my cat also perceived. So that helped me not feel like I was totally losing it. Was my cat was locked in on this being as it shifted into a sphere, into a like a white sphere, a big white sphere. And my cat, I couldn't get his attention and he was winking at it. You know, cats do when they're in the presence of something they're comfortable with, which was surprising. It was like he recognized them or something. But that was as far as like a direct experience. They didn't fully materialize, but I don't think they needed to. That was pretty amazing.
Wow. Yeah, I can see the cat be excited.
Yeah. Yeah. I was yelling at him. I was like, Hubble. I was trying to get his attention. And he was like, no, this is,
Yeah, cats are funny creatures. So I got two of them here, and there are times when you see them, they just keep looking at things like there's something there, but I can't see it.
yeah, yeah,
They see stuff.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they can see higher up into the light spectrum than we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Now,
was really
when
cool.
you work with people, you also work with breath work and meditation.
Mm,
Folks, if you want to learn how to meditate the right way, get in touch with her. Yeah, you need to because I have a saying I've been using for decades, and that is that the path to higher consciousness for most people usually come through meditation.
agreed. Yeah.
So this is something that, and just because preacher have told you that don't meditate because that's from the other side, no, it isn't.
Yeah.
The Bible tells you can. They don't call it meditation. They say, be still.
Mm,
The Bible, I don't know where it is. I read it. They said, be still. They don't talk about you going in the closet and not move around with your hands. And no, they say, be still in your mind. So,
mm.
yes, it's in there. You can.
You
So,
can. It's a direct connection. And that's
yes.
the way to have that direct connection.
Yeah. When you work with people, explain what they can how you can help them with breath work and meditation as even as an alternative to psychedelics or drugs. You can
Mm.
get same effects somehow or same development. Talk about that.
Yeah, I love this question because I feel very passionately about it. Psychedelics are can be really great tools for opening you to what's possible, but meditation is the mechanism by which you walk through those doors yourself at will when you want to. And so the altered state experience, high gamma, whatever you want to call it, is accessible through meditation. And the amazing thing about that is that you are the owner of that experience. And once you learn the mechanics of it, you can take that ride whenever you want and you can explore for yourself what's possible. And so meditation means to become familiar with. And I like that definition because what you're becoming familiar with is shifting over time. First, you're becoming familiar with the incessant thought that we all have that's on the surface, that most of us are drowning out with other things. And so when you first start to turn that awareness up, it can be intense. That's where a lot of people stop, is because that initial intensity can be a lot to move through. But if you have good guidance and if you have good teaching and structure, you can move through that and you can start to become aware of what's next, which is that awareness that sits behind your thoughts and the highest self. You can start to know when your ego, that personality, that orientation to hierarchy is active, and you can use it when you need to in this incarnation. And then you can also put it in the back seat, put your highest self in the front seat so that the ego is not driving your life. These are the types of things that meditation helps you to really understand, that you're not going to necessarily get fully by a one-off psychedelic experience. This is bringing those insights deeply down into your experience so that it becomes wisdom and so that it becomes a part of you. And so that is a process. And breath work is really important. That's a part of all of our journeys because the nervous system has to feel safe in order to allow you to expand. So that's why we start with the breath. And breath, there's all kinds of different types of breaths that help us in different ways. And so that's a really powerful tool to clear the space so that you can step into those next expansions of consciousness through meditation. So that's really what we focus on, is the structure for your awakening. And eventually you'll get to the point to where you don't need it.
Yeah. What do you think about, there are, I know a lady in Australia that has not eaten food for 26 years.
Yeah.
She is a breatharian. She lives
Mhm.
off the sun. Have you ever run into anything like that?
I'm fascinated by this conversation. I read about it first in Autobiography of a Yogi, and he visits some breatharians, and I believe a master in India that was not drinking either, so fully a breatharian.
Yeah.
And it makes sense to me. It makes a lot of sense to me because if you become more and more one with the field-based experience. So I like to think of consciousness in a funnel. And so expanded states are up towards the higher ends of the funnel. And we learn how to move ourselves out of constriction, where you can't see as much possibility down here, and into the higher echelons. You can access more possibility. And you can work with energy, prana, chi. The field has everything you could possibly need in it. And one of the things my guides have told me personally is to eat less, which I first was a little insulted by.
Yeah.
but but it does help the channel, and you have to do this in a way that makes sense for you. You can't just jump into it,
Yeah.
cold one day. This is a big time process. But over time, because when your body's having to focus on the metabolism side of existence, it's more energy drawn towards that. As you release that energy, you have more energy that can be distributed towards consciousness, towards the mind, towards
Yeah.
the field. So it makes a lot of sense to me that that's a direction that we could go in and probably will go in. And then I think the next step from there is the light body, is
Yeah.
becoming non-physical.
There you go. Absolutely. And when it comes to that energy you just mentioned, uh, when you look at the sun, and don't do this without really knowing what you do, otherwise you're going to destroy your eyes.
Yeah.
So you look at the periphery and you sit there, starting out with just 10 seconds, then you go to 20, and you ramp it up until you get used to it. But there's energy coming in from the sun through the eyes that goes into the body, and the body knows how to convert that energy into physical energy that sustains the body. And if you wonder about it, ask anybody with the solar panels on the roof. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
energy. You betcha.
absolutely.
So this is very possible. In fact, there was a guy from India. His name was Hira Ratan Manek. The
Mm,
NASA did an experiment with him. They observed him 24/7 for I think it was 411 days. without food. He drank a little water, a small glass of water every day, and he had salt. I
Mm-hmm.
think it was Himalayan salt that he had, and that was it for
Wow.
411 days. So this is a concept that, just for fun of it, guys, just research it for yourself, but do it in an intelligent way.
Yeah.
Get counseling from somebody that knows how to start with meditation, start developing their mind and their body. That's why you need to go to soulpodapp.com. Get in touch with her, because I think I know enough about her. If you do, if you start getting counsel from, your life will change.
Mm,
That's how it works.
it is. Thank you
And
for that.
gosh, we got 4 minutes left of the show, but I got one really, really goofy question for you.
Sure.
What is God?
Mm, what is
I,
God?
I get that
Hmm.
question ever so often, and
I like the question. It's a good
yeah,
one. I think it's that it's an origin point. It encompasses all paradox because as you awaken, you'll notice there's all these paradoxes that you encounter. And so God is all of it. It's the connective tissue of all realities. And we are also it. And it's all
yeah,
happening now. And it's everywhere all at once. And
yeah,
it's love. And I think love is connected to that question because I view love as ultimately, beyond romantic love, a recognition of that connection, that inherent connection that is within everything. And when we see that, we experience this love, this holy smokes, wow, awe-inspiring, beyond the physical experience moment, this unconditional love that a lot of people talk about after near-death experiences that you can't really put words to in the physical. That's us recognizing God, which is ourselves.
yeah. I think God is perceived different by different people. When I
Mm.
grew up, my preacher that back in Europe, they told me it was this really old guy sitting up there somewhere. He's got long white beard, long white
Making
hair.
judgments.
Yeah, oh yeah, he knows everything about you. And he's got 10 rules for you. And if you
Yeah.
violate any of those rules, you're going downstairs in the basement next to the
Yeah.
furnace and you're gonna, yeah, okay.
I mean, I can tell you, having been on briefly on the other side, there was no judgment.
That's
It
right.
was just pure acceptance, witnessing, love. Um, yeah, there was no feeling of a judgment.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of people that has been listening to the preacher telling them that they're going to hell because they went to war and killed somebody, no, it doesn't happen that way.
Hmm.
So gosh, I really appreciate this time with you. This was really interesting.
I did too. This was really great. What a
Yeah,
creation.
yeah. What is next for you now?
Hmm.
You
That's a
know,
good
we gotta
question.
we gotta expand. What is next?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What's next for me? Um, I am just about to publish my science fiction novel that I've worked on for about 8 years. So that feels like a soul karmic thing that I was meant to do in this lifetime that I feel very guided and supported and excited to share that with the world. So
Mm,
that'll be coming out. I feel it will be this year. So
yeah.
I'll be on a lookout for that. And then we're continuing to listen to what SoulPod wants to be, how it wants to serve people's awakening as we move into this time. And I think and I'm feeling that I'm going to be called more and more into this intersection with contact as far as helping people understand that contact is a consciousness phenomena, how to engage with these interdimensional beings as we step into our more galactic relationships and really learn more about who it is that we are.
Yeah.
That will be something that I feel I will be spending more time on as
That's all.
as time goes on.
That sounds good. So also in your words, where can people get a hold of you and where can they see what you're doing or get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find us soulpodapp.com. You can find our app on the App Store. We're doing some really cool things this year that's going to support your awakening journey. Walking meditations, all kinds of new practices coming in. And you can find me also on Substack. So every week I write kind of what I'm feeling from the collective, what my guides are sharing with me, and deep dives into what we're capable of as a species. And so you can also find us on SoulPod as well on YouTube.
All right. Well, this was fun. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. This is really fun.
Yeah, but maybe I could talk you into coming back sometime.
Anytime,
Oh,
anytime. Would
sounds
be delighted to.
wonderful. We'll do that. All right, then. So thank you very much, Crystal. And
Thank you.
for those of you out there watching here, if you are watching on YouTube right now, please subscribe. That's going to help us a lot. And then, until next time, be good to each other.
Mm.